up nice and tight.
So the
Is there a way to change the focal?
Yep. So you have to have, if you're going to use a camera system, whatever you're engraving on or cutting has to be in focus before you go to the cameras on this side.
Okay.
So if you didn't focus first and then try to use the cameras, it doesn't quite work because it will be out of focus with the camera system.
Okay. So how does that work?
So go ahead, put this in.
Okay.
Is there an optimal spot to focus on the item too, or just anywhere on it?
So if it's a nice flat thing, it doesn't matter. If it's a curved, let's say you got like a bottle.
So this happened on the rotor.
Okay.
Okay. On
So
fourth
the
axis.
rotor is a whole different animal.
Okay. Then that's what we discovered.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll get to that when we get to that.
Okay.
But
let's say this was a 4-inch deal,
Yeah.
right? That we still want to do an autofocus first and
Yep.
then go to our camera.
Yep.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly. So this is the autofocus, comes down, touches, and then it goes off. And then that would put the camera system in focus.
So it doesn't matter knowing that we're engraving in the middle of this. We could focus
As long
anywhere
as
on it.
it's flat and equal throughout, it doesn't matter.
Cool.
Yeah. So if this side was higher and this side was lower, then you would have to do this side first, this side second.
Sure.
Yeah. Something like that. Because you couldn't change the focal distance in between.
Much like doing a gun stock.
Exactly.
You only have so much range of curvature
Yep.
before you start this. And that's one of the things that we noticed on this was obviously this side of the box is a little bit higher.
Just slightly higher.
And this is what we focaled to. And so this side of the box carved a little bit different because it's a
just the focal distance.
eighth of an inch difference.
Yep.
Whatever.
Yep. So you could probably so you have the autofocus, and then you also have the manual,
Okay.
which is this little lever guide.
Okay.
So what'll happen, the reason the autofocus and the manual focus don't line up is after I hit go with the autofocus, it's still going to drop it just a little bit more.
Okay. It's going to drop the plunger.
Yeah, it's going to drop the table just slightly.
Gotcha.
So let's say I was kind of dealing with this where I wanted to do both at the same time.
Okay.
I might do my focal distance something like that, right? So I'm kind of having the two.
Okay.
And then I'll have a better spot size for both.
Okay, so split the difference.
Yes, what's the
Right.
difference? Because the CO2 has actually got quite a bit of play in its focal distance.
Yeah, it sounds like it's got about a half an inch, right?
About that.
Yeah.
Maybe less, maybe like a quarter inch.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of it, if it will cut through a half-inch material, it's got to have that much.
Yeah, it goes through that far. Yep. So the other thing, speaking of cutting, if this was, let's say this is acrylic, I like it just a couple clicks in, just because I'm pushing the hottest part of the beam just slightly deeper in the material gives me a slightly clearer of a cut.
So what you're saying is once I do an autofocus,
If you're going to do autofocus, just do the autofocus.
Okay, I got you.
This is only really for the manual.
Okay.
Yep.
And so, I mean, again, so this is just a spring plunger, right?
Yep.
So what are we looking for here?
Just a kiss. So like
Okay.
if I was going to do this without splitting it, I just bring this up like about like that.
Okay.
Yeah. That would be perfect.
Where it's getting a little friction there.
Yep, just a kiss.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there, outside of a multi-layer deal or curved deal, why would we use the manual?
Gives you a little bit more control.
Okay.
Like I said, for the cuts, like with the acrylics, you can push the hot
But can't you do that with the auto? Once you auto it,
You'd
then
have-
can't you bump it, nudge it?
No, because it drops it as soon as you pick it up. So you could nudge it on its while it's running, just before it runs.
Right.
So you can play with that focus at any time, but it's going to do its own thing right from the start.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So you can always adjust the focus at any time.
Okay.
Yeah. Go with that?
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. So back to mistakes.
Sure.
Yep. How do we? I mean, obviously, we're never going to prevent mistakes, right? But where do we want to err?
So a couple things too that I was necessarily talking about focuses is focusing. People will try to focus something nice and round like this, and especially if they do the autofocus, it'll hit and it'll turn it,
Okay.
and the table keeps coming up, and then it crashes itself.
Okay.
So that's a big one that a lot of people do. Is trying to autofocus a non-flat surface.
Okay.
So that'll get you into trouble. really, I mean, you're not going to do heavy damage to anything. Even if you crash the table, it's just going to say, hey, the table's crashed. And then you'll...
So the belt won't slip.
Everything kind of cuts. It'll throw an error and everything kind of shuts off.
Okay.
So what you... Sometimes if it's like a mild crash, this will still work.
Okay.
If it's not, and there's like a hard crash, you'll have to open this and twist the table down by hand.
Okay.
But that's it.
And where is that?
It's behind this side. You can even go through the front door and just pull the thing yourself. But it's behind this door right here. It's the bottom one. You'll see it's the only one with a handle.
That's what you can do. There's a handle on the gear.
Yeah. Yeah. On top of the motor.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think that from playing around, that we were comfortable on flat surfaces with the camera system.
Yep.
That seemed pretty basic, I guess. I think that the fourth axis is what really kind of threw us off.
We'll go over that
Would
too.
you mind grabbing another one of those cups out of the small format?
As far as other mistakes too, focusing before the camera system is a pretty big one. The other thing is like, let's say we're going to engrave on this, so it's a 25 by 25 roughly.
Yeah.
But people will design on the 48 by 36,
Right.
and then they're like, "Oh, my ratios are off." I'm like, "Well, let me see what you designed." You know, so you can design on the 48 by 36 and still hit this every day of the week.
Right.
It's just you're going to have to be a lot more precise with your placements, your ratios, and your measures.
So what's the better practice then?
To design for the size of the thing you're printing on,
And
then expand it if you need to.
and then once you're printing in the
Yeah, then you
Epilog
can move it
software,
anywhere you
then
want.
you can adjust
Exactly.
to your substrate instead of trying to adjust that 48-36.
You got it. Yeah. So anything on the top left corner, I almost always never use the cameras, just because I'm already accurate on that top left corner, especially if it's nice and square, like something like this.
Right.
And I don't need the camera, because the camera, they're fish eyes, right? So, you know, right about in this range, you can't really tell where the
Right
landing.
in this range.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you're gonna do cameras, I like right underneath. Not either one or the other. Yeah. But I mean, they still will work. Just mean the closer you get to that ruler, it's a little bubbly.
Right, because the further away you are from the actual.
You got it. Yeah. Cool. Want to go over this now?
Yep.